Hi, and you're now with the Forerunner Chronicles. All right, everybody, so it's already 2 weeks in to the infamous year 2012, the year in which many people have greatly expected to see a myriad of political and social game-changing actions to take place. But nonetheless, there is still a plethora of initiatives that were enacted in the year 2011 that I can't just let skip by me without pointing a finger in their diabolical direction. And one of these initiatives were actually set in place by the Obama administration nearing the end of 2011. It was called the Strategic Implementation Plan. And what the Strategic Implementation Plan, or SIP, is for short, by the way, this stuff is such garbage that you gotta sip it down to actually tolerate it, because you couldn't gulp it all down in one fell swoop. But anyway, what the Strategic Implementation Plan is all about is about empowering local partners to work in conjunction with the federal government to help root out and seek out possible violent extremists in your community. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you take this Strategic Implementation Plan and set it side by side the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which has now given the power to our military to actually lock up United States citizens in military detention facilities for indefinite periods of time, what you have collectively is a social-political Molotov cocktail, which is about to kindle the flames of the criminalization of the freedom of thought. And I say the freedom of thought because the Bible says clearly, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. Anyway, here's a short news clip from NPR that is actually discussing this issue.
Later today, the White House will unveil a broad new strategy aimed at battling homegrown terrorism here in the United States. Many recent terror plots have come from inside the U.S., from violent extremists who get radical ideas from the internet. And the administration wants to head off those plots. We're going to talk about that this morning with NPR's Dina Temple-Raston, who has details about the plan that others have not yet reported. Dina, good morning.
Good morning. Well, basically, they're looking to work at the local level. The White House is really sensitive to the civil liberties issues all this might raise. So part of the plan has the Department of Homeland Security stepping up its community outreach to talk about protecting people's rights in the communities. They're going to be enlisting schools and community leaders in this, and they're going to teach them to identify violent extremists so they can be stopped. What's different here is that the administration has identified these unusual partners to help them. The Department of Education, for example.
Yeah, getting federal law enforcement to work with schools is a little bit unusual.
It's an odd mix, but a lot of the agencies and groups in this plan have never participated in national security issues before. You know, they've worked with law enforcement on drugs and gangs and bullying, but the idea is to make spotting violent extremism just another extension of those familiar programs. The strategy isn't going to be seamless. It's going to require training people to know what to look for, of course.
What is this something? What are we supposed to be looking for exactly?
Well, you know, I spoke with this key person on the White House National Security Staff who's working on this. His name is Quentin Wiktorowicz, and here's how he explained it.
So, for example, it could be a combination between viewing that kind of violent extremist material online at the same time as making statements that indicate a rejection of American society, hatred toward other groups. But again, none of those would be in isolation from one another. It would be the combination of factors.
So the key distinction here is that they're going to be trying to track behavior. And the new strategy they're supposed to unveil this afternoon would enlist whole communities to help them, not just law enforcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, so I can only speak for myself on this issue. But when I hear that our federal government wants to enlist the services of the Department of Education to actually train our youth, our children, as to how they can be efficient in seeking out, spying out possible violent extremists in our community, that makes me nauseated. Matter of fact, in my observation, this is reminiscent of the activities that took place in Nazi Germany under the rule of Hitler in the establishing of the Hitler Youth. Now that's my observation. How about you? And by the way, here's another question to take into consideration. What are the guidelines that our federal government is going to utilize to actually define who can possibly be a violent extremist? Well, we don't have to be left in the dark on this issue, because in March of 2009, the Department of Homeland Security released an extremist lexicon in which they delineated a variety of individuals and groups that could be possible violent extremists. Here are a few examples of those that are delineated within that lexicon.
A person that is anti-technology, which is an individual that is opposed to increased industrialization or new technology. The alternative media, which is a media source that may give a different view of the news rather than that which is presented by the mainstream media. And some government sources label those that have 7 days worth of food or more stored in their homes as possible extremists in our society.
So let me get this straight. You're telling me that people that are anti-technology are possible violent extremists. Well, in that case, that means that we need to invade every Amish community from state to state in America, because you know that the Amish believe that electricity is evil and they rather ride in horse and buggies than in automobiles. So you got to lock them up. And what about having a 7-day supply of food at your home? You know, they also define that as you being possibly a violent extremist. Well, the last time I looked, a lot of people's grandmothers like to can peaches and pears and all sorts of things. Does that make grandmas that like to believe in the Bible violent extremists as well? I'm glad my grandma's dead. And yes, I'm mocking at this stuff because it's absolutely ridiculous. You mean to tell me that alternative media makes you a possible violent extremist? Ladies and gentlemen, all these things make you is different from the norm. And when we begin to start reaching out to criminalize people that are living outside of the norm, we are now going outside of the boundaries of our Constitution into the realms of totalitarianism. This is serious. And for those of you out there that might be astute and say, well, you know, they took that Department of Homeland Security lexicon out of rotation the very day that it was released. Well, you're right. Kudos for you on that one. But then answer me this. Why is it that the very next month, April of 2009, the Department of Homeland Security released another report in which it dealt with the issue of the resurgence of radicalization and homegrown terrorism within the United States of America? And in this document, it discussed the issue of violent extremism, but it used broader and more generalized terminologies rather than the specific categorical approach that was found within the Department of Homeland Security extremist lexicon. Ladies and gentlemen, if it's not becoming clear to you, let me make it clear for you. Our government does not want us aware of the fact that they have specific categories to place us in. And this is no more than a revelation of what the Bible already told us would come to pass in the near future. I've told you once and I will tell you again. The Bible is very clear in the book of Revelation chapter 13 and verse 11. We are told there, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. This is a prophetic symbol of the United States of America, promoting Christian lamb-like principles, but one day will speak as a dragon. And the dragon, according to Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9, is a symbol of the devil. When the United States of America speaks as a dragon, it means it will reveal the agenda of the devil himself through its legislative bodies and its judicial officials through the laws that it puts in place. And what is the agenda of the dragon? It's found in Revelation 12 and verse 17. The dragon is wroth with the woman, God's people, and he went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Bible-believing Christians that believe in keeping all of God's 10 commandments are the target of the devil and are the target of these laws. Well, you say to me, well, I don't see how this is possible. Well, I know you don't see how this is possible, because the dragon's approach is not very visible. You see, the Bible also tells us in Revelation 12 and verse 9, speaking of the dragon, it says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. Notice that the great dragon is also called that old serpent. Well, the Bible gives us more information about that old serpent in the book of Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. We are told there, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God hath made. The serpent's approach is subtle, ladies and gentlemen, and the dragon is also called that old serpent. So when the United States of America speaks as a dragon, it will subtly, imperceptibly put in place laws that at the very end of their fulfillment will be used against God's people to persecute them. This is where we are. Where are you with Jesus Christ right now? We are living in the unfolding of Bible prophecy. And many of us are so stuck in our television sets, so stuck in what we're going to wear tomorrow, so stuck in honey, what's for dinner, that we are not realizing that Jesus is knocking ever so softly at the doorway of our hearts, begging us to come in so that he can cleanse us from all of our sin, so that he can give us power to live lives of purity and holiness just like him, so that he can prepare us, so that he can strengthen us, so that he can empower us, so that we can stand in the time in which this crisis will hit our whole world like a nuclear warhead. Ladies and gentlemen, aren't you going to allow Jesus Christ to come into your heart? This is the time. Not to be worried about houses and lands, not to be worried about clothing, not to be worried about degrees. It's time to be worrying about, is my life hidden in Jesus Christ? That's what we should be thinking about. That should be what's at the forefront of our minds. The dragon is moving to devour the people of God. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you preparing? God help us. As always, this is the Forerunner. And whether you like it or not, it's coming. And the truth is the truth.